The start of Overwatch League 2022 was fantastic. Watching pros in a new game was an absolute joy, and the games themselves often delivered. To make matters even more interesting, the results were unexpected on more than a few occasions. There was a ton of information to absorb, and with how chaotic things got at times, the brain could easily be sent into overdrive. It's time to digest. Here is one thing that I learned about every team from the Kickoff Clash. We'll be going in order of worst record to best, which means that Vancouver are up first. My statement on this franchise is, you are somehow even worse than I thought. I had a lot of hope for the Vancouver Titans, and by a lot I mean I didn't think they'd finish 20th. I was confident they weren't going to be the worst team in the league, but based off of what we've seen so far, they definitely are. It has been tough to watch, let's not really sugarcoat things here. They bashed their heads against the wall every single week in hopeless mirror matches, and anytime they were better on a different look, for some reason, they'd immediately swap off and go back to the stuff they were struggling on. Moving on from their coaching staff was absolutely in the best interest of this team, and I cannot think of a better person to add on to your team than Defiant. It's a really good addition. The talent wasn't being guided properly with the old coaching staff. Reacting now gives the players more time to adjust to Defiant's system that will hopefully be better. Good on Vancouver for taking this important first step. I'm not too sure about that Psycho drop though. The Paris Eternal. Changes mean more than meets the eye. I fully expected Paris to still be a mid-level team. What we got instead were some honest struggles, both visually and internally. You know things are wrong with your team when a fan favorite like Naga is suddenly getting released. The Eternal are still not fully through their adjustment period. The new coaching has largely had some struggles so far. The early question on everyone's mind this year was if they made a mistake parting ways with Get Amazed, and right now, as it currently stands, those questions are still in full form. There's a lot of good individual stuff happening, but they're not making it work as a team, and this is something that could definitely improve over time, so in that regard, I believe there's still hope for a Paris turnaround. On the other hand, I'm a bit concerned that things are a little messy behind the scenes, and after it was announced that Paris would be relocating to Vegas next year, the negative vibes are continuing to grow. Can they turn it around? Let's find out. The Guangzhou Charge. You are the most uninspirational team in the East. The Charge only showed fight in 2 out of 6 matches, and let's call it how it is. If they played Shanghai under normal circumstances, it would have been even worse. I really don't know what to say. Their success rate is very limited to specific compositions, and they constantly find themselves getting outdueled in the mirror match. Their support and DPS lines have largely been outperformed this year. Not every game or anything, but too many to ignore. They better wake up, because right now, they're on track to be the worst team in the East. The NYXL. Big names don't mean everything. Before the season began, there was hope that the NYXL could be pretty decent this year. They brought in some household names to support Flora, and they even got a superstar in Yaki. But as it turns out, having big names doesn't guarantee much of anything at all. If the synergy is off or someone isn't in their comfort zone, you are bound to struggle, and it just so happens that New York were dealing with both. They were clearly divided. People often wouldn't be on the same page when engaging the enemy in those dives, and then there's the main support situation. Gangnam Jin is not having a good time. This is not his natural position, and it really shows in game. It's not fair to him in my honest opinion, but nonetheless, his Lucio does not get the job done, because New York, when you watch them play, they're not decisive. I'm low-key kind of scared of where New York stand right now. Their one win came against the Vancouver Titans, who they nearly went to a map 5 with. If that's not a sign that you're in danger, I don't know what is. Hopefully they sign another player or benefit from some time off. It would be a shame to see this amount of talent go to waste. The LA Valiant. Perseverance is the key. I don't care what the record says, the Valiant genuinely looked competitive. To get a win, not finish last in APAC, and take 3 of the top teams in APAC to a map 5 is really good. This team was pretty much not expected to do anything, and yet, Dia looks like he hasn't missed a beat, and the Valiant in general have done a fantastic job of embracing the Zarya comms and playing Mei and other things that play up to their strengths. No Hill is a god coach for doing so much with so little. It also helps that they have this idea of zero expectations working to their advantage. So as a result of all these things, they seem like a scary team on the schedule for just about anybody. The only thing is, they have a clutch issue to work out. Beating Chengdu is awesome and they should feel very proud, but they had a bunch of other chances to win some games and really improve that record. In many of their matchups, they were actually in a position to close out the series. They were in the lead, in the driver's seat if you will, but they failed more often than not. They've proven they can be competitive, which is a great first step, but now it's time to level up. The Boston Uprising. Striker was the problem? It feels bizarre to say such a thing, seeing as Striker is without a doubt the best player in Boston's history, but the fact of the matter is, this team was painfully hard to watch. Crimzo had to take a week off for medical reasons, and the team itself was all out of whack. The synergy was kind of meh. But then they got rid of Striker, and at least for a game, suddenly, it's like a giant weight had been lifted off their shoulders. It's a bit early to tell since it's only been a few games since Striker's departure, but you can clearly see the difference from an energy standpoint at the very least. If Boston got rid of something toxic here, then good on them. Time will tell if this works in Boston's favor, but they seem to be trending upward here at the end of the stage. Keep an eye on these guys. I think some more underdog victories could be on the way. The Chengdu Hunters. Budget problems suck. I can't even begin to explain the pain that I feel knowing how bad the Hunters got screwed over. Their parent company having no money resulted in them partially dismantling what very well could have been their greatest roster to date. A pedestrian 2-4 qualifier could have been way more. I can't help but wonder how things could have gone if they had the likes of Yveltal and Aprita. It hurt their versatility, and you'd have to imagine all of the other trade stuff that was going down had a tough effect on everybody's mental. I wouldn't call Chengdu's performance awful, but it certainly wasn't good either. Hopefully they can adjust or get the meta shift they're looking for. Seeing Leaf play for an irrelevant team is just so awful. The London Spitfire. Comfort is the key. The Spitfire are one of the most fun underdogs in recent memory. They might have missed out on the tournament this go-around, but 3-3 is still very good for them. And I don't want to hear anything about their schedule being easy either. They were still underdogs at the end of the day, so it's impressive no matter what. This 2022 campaign has already seen them net more wins than they did all of last year. London was mega competitive, even defeating the Atlanta Reign and pushing the likes of the LA Gladiators. And it's all because they played up to their strengths rather than trying to force stuff they're not as good at. Nobody else is running Rush like they do. It gives them the best possible chance to win. And because they're so well practiced and confident on this composition, they practically got free wins against the people who even tried to mirror them. I owe the Spitfire and their fans an apology. I gave them zero chance this year. I deserve to be clowned on. I won't stop you. London, in my opinion, are a prime example of what any underdog team should be trying to do. Play what works for you. Increase your odds as much as humanly possible. Through this mindset and some great synergy, the Spitfire are anything but a free win. It's a nice redemption story playing out before our very eyes. I mean, look at Hottie. While I personally thought maybe people jumped on the bandwagon a bit quick after that first week of play, I admit that he has slowly but surely won me over recently. This team is playing with such confidence, they're fun to watch, and I truly hope they continue to prove me wrong. It's been a painful road to get here. They deserve this. The Washington Justice. New year, same confusing team. I don't know, man. The Justice are such a tough team to get a wrap on. Their ups and downs never seem to stop. It's like they picked up exactly where they did last year, but just with a few new faces. One moment, they're nearly defeating the Shock. Then the next, like we saw a couple of weeks before the tournament, you're getting rolled by Boston and Florida. They have the talent to go far, that much is obvious, and in a way, I have been impressed by their DPS and their backline. And yet, there's never any balance. They rely far too heavily on their DPS to carry them to relevance, and I can't help but wonder if they should continue to stick with this same coaching staff and overall strategy. The Justice could be better than this, and yet, it's hard to see them making the necessary improvements. If they can't work out that consistency issue, nobody's taking them seriously. The Atlanta Reign. We can't get a proper read on you yet. Talk about a wacky start for Atlanta. Their qualifiers were all over the place. But then they come out of nowhere during the tournament as if they were a completely different team. That win against the Shock is very high quality. The question on if they would do fine without Pelican has been answered with an emphatic yes. Kaya certainly picked up the slack, and I appreciate what Nero has done as well. Not to mention that their rookies have all shown promise in their own ways. Ultraviolet in particular is someone that I have loved watching, and he truly does look like a premier flex support. This weekend showed us firsthand that Atlanta are capable of some pretty nasty peaks. We maybe could still have some questions about their flexibility, as they clearly have some work to do on Rush and Zarya and even their Winston comps to a certain extent, but at the very least, Reign fans can walk away from this tournament knowing they are capable. But it's hard to invest in them until they show us a bit more consistency moving forward. The Philadelphia Fusion. You could be a scary dark horse this year. This Fusion team is way ahead of schedule. A tournament finals appearance on their first try is a big deal. Nobody knew what to expect from this franchise after a series of unfortunate events. They essentially started all over with the exception of Carpe. They picked up promising talent, but a lot of people didn't know if it was going to be enough. As far as I'm concerned, they did a fantastic job. I don't care what the final result was and the fact that they got second place again, blah blah blah, because their new DPS are absolutely sick. MN3 and Zest have superstar potential, and having Carpe back them up just makes them absurdly explosive. And that's not all. I believe their new main support and main tank players have been a pleasant surprise. This mix of veterans and rookies are no joke at all. If they continue to improve and maybe add another piece along the way, they could be a serious thorn in the rest of APAC's side. But you know, right now they're not quite there to me. There's some improvement to be had. Most of their losses showed some clear-cut flaws, like with poor ultimate timing and overcommitment during fights. But I mean, you do have to remember still that they had 2 good weeks compared to only 1 bad one, and they 3-0'd Shanghai 2 times for crying out loud. That is sick. The MN3 and Zest fear factor is very real. Look out for Philly, APAC, or you just might get sucker punched. The Toronto Defiant. You have potential, but you aren't quite there yet. It's weird to say such a thing, considering that this team made the tournament and posted a decent record during the qualifiers. And also, their support line, I'd like to think it was pretty elite, and a lot of their guys generally looked pretty comfortable. But as I say, year after year after year with this franchise, good only gets you so far. Good's not going to win you a tournament. You have to rise above, be something more. We need some hardcore development. They just aren't top tier at any particular thing. They could maybe get there with time, but until further notice, it's tough to imagine they'll be anything more than decent. The Houston Outlaws. The Don tank is no joke. I gotta give Houston some credit here. I was skeptical of their decision to have Piggy be the one and only tank. It seemed like there'd be too many holes. Enter Dante, who made the surprise appearance as the team's other tank. He stuck to Doomfist exclusively, but Houston made it work. They managed to find a way to play Pelican, Merit, and Dante all at the same time. And while being less versatile has come back to bite them at certain points, they've looked good as well. Dante got tons of picks on enemy backlines and showed no fear of being the shot caller despite being the only native English speaker in the starting lineup. However, I'm still of the belief that they could use another tank. With how prevalent Winston has been in the meta, it would be nice to have that option available. The Outlaws are essentially playing at a disadvantage, and it doesn't help that they're maybe not amazing yet on the Zarya comp, despite Piggy being really good on her. And until they find some solutions, I think that climbing to the top is going to be nothing more than a dream for them. The Seoul Dynasty. Curses are meant to be broken. There were concerns over how far Seoul could push themselves once Jonak took a break from professional play. It wasn't that they still couldn't be good, it was that their overall ceiling was taking a hit. But they pressed onward, and after a somewhat rough start filled with a bit of experimentation, they ended up getting their first tournament championship in franchise history. At long last, Seoul's failure to meet expectations is over. Right from the start of their existence, they were expected to be great, and after so many failed opportunities and shortcomings and failures, they're finally here. Over 4 years of pain are done, and just to sweeten the deal, there were lots to be impressed by. I mean, they were so good during that tournament run. Smurf is seemingly a perfect fit. His championship experience definitely did some good, and his dives with Prophet were excellent. Speaking of Prophet, he played out of his mind. He stepped up big time for the entire stage. Definitely an early season MVP candidate, no doubt. But honestly, the guy who might have stood out the most for me at least was Vindame. He was their rock. He demonstrated unreal abilities for a rookie. And I believe that Seoul can continue to flesh him out and make him even better, especially considering that he has Toby as someone to guide him. I'm liking the vibe of this Dynasty team quite a bit. If you had any doubts about how far the Dynasty could go, it's time to kiss them goodbye. The Florida Mayhem. Sometimes, starting over is for the best. I admit it. Florida have severely proved me wrong. I thought for sure that moving on from their 2020 core would result in a pretty mediocre year, and yet, here Florida are with a 4-2 stage record, and even in their losses, they looked pretty competitive. The Mayhem are confident, and their teamwork is surprisingly solid. The young guys on the roster showed immense potential. Someone, in my opinion, looked like a composed veteran, while Hydron and Sir Majed exemplified very good playmaking potential. I gotta give Florida scouting some big credit for that Majed signing. I mean, what a hidden gem he has proven to be. And of course, what would a Florida segment be without discussing what Checkmate has done? He showed us exactly why Florida picked him up to begin with. The Checkmate memes are long forgotten. He's a true flex DPS who can hurt you on multiple looks. The Mayhem are a scrappy dark horse competitor. They have by far been one of the most enjoyable teams to watch. It goes to show that sometimes all you really need to do is hit that reset button. The LA Gladiators. Composure is the key. I can't stress enough how hard the Glads put this exact description on display. They faced some of the most devastating chokes in recent memory just a few weeks ago, but instead of being sad like a bunch of bums, they used it as a learning experience. They got better from it. As a result, they were locked in come tournament time, and from there, we saw them string together masterclass performances. I mean, nobody was able to push them hard enough. There was no choking to be had. They kept their foot on the gas all the way to the bank. What I love so much about this team and this run in particular is that everybody pitched in. It wasn't one or two guys deadlifting everybody. Kevster and Shu were absolutely insane, but they're not the only ones. Reiner was dependable no matter what composition was being played. Ants brought explosiveness off the bench. Then there's my man Funny Astro. He played with a special kind of fire during this tournament run. You could tell how badly he wanted this, and I couldn't be happier for him. After all those second place finishes on Philly, he deserves this. Speaking of deserved accomplishments, I think we can all say that this title meant the most to Patty Pan by far. This was the moment that he had dreamt about for years. He was always a very talented player, but had no way to join the league back in 2018 due to the strict age requirement. You have to remember that back during this time, he was a DPS prodigy. He was way too young, like 15 years old. So he sat there for years, biding his time. And when he finally made his triumphant return to Pro Overwatch, he made it count. He was under some heavy criticism as soon as he joined the Glads, and even for the first couple of weeks of this year, but the man never let it get to him. Just look at how he played after those first few games. He really improved. His soldier play in the tournament was as good as it gets. It was clutch kill after clutch kill to silence the haters and the doubters once and for all. And in the end, when it was finally over, the emotions came pouring out. You could tell that this meant the world to him. He left it all out there. Those are the types of moments that make esports so special, ladies and gentlemen. Patty touched the hearts of fans worldwide, and I'm glad we got to witness it. Congrats to him, as well as the LA Gladiators, on a job well done. The Shanghai Dragons. COVID has nothing on you. Real talk, the Dragons had it rough. A COVID outbreak had them playing from a different location in the Kickoff clash, I believe, and for whatever the reason, some of their internet cables that they needed never got installed, which meant that everything was being based on one source. Their ping was severely unstable from what I hear, making it even more difficult to win matches. Imagine going through all of that plus COVID around you and still being just one map away from a tournament final. Say what you will about their struggles this stage, but nearly every time the game was close, they were being clutch enough to win. They've got the heart of a true champion, no doubt about it. Navigating through so much, plus the ridiculousness of APAC, is proof of their greatness. Are they a lot more beatable than they used to be? Yeah, absolutely. But their guys can still play. In fact, they even have an additional weapon this go-around thanks to the resurgence of Who Are You in a Genji meta. And with how Lip is playing, it's kinda crazy. I mean, the Dragons didn't need any more help, right? It's unfair. This team proved that they're still more than worthy of defending their title this year. Maybe it won't be so easy this year, but at the end of the day, Shanghai fans can rest easy knowing that their team is still very trustworthy. The Hangzhou Spark. Your new rookies are a bunch of chads. The Spark had a fantastic start to their year. I mean, they played way better than I ever could have thought. They had consistency, there was some star power involved, and just a really fun playstyle. Most of their team looked pretty darn good out there. I fell in love with those rookies. alexyOWL stole the show. He was popping off every single game, it felt like. His hero pool was sick. Just an absolute monster who gave Shy the help that he's always wanted since joining the team. I also want to shout out Irony though. Hangzhou desperately needed an overhaul at support, and they had failed to rely on this position for a couple of years before he joined. MCD was pretty good for them, but there was drama and it didn't last. Irony finally seems like the answer they've been looking for. He's quietly been one of the better Ana players in the league, and I only say quietly because a lot of attention has been going towards alexyOWL. The Spark showed some incredible flashes despite the rough ending in their tournament. I'm still not completely convinced though that the Spark are a contender in APAC just yet. Chengdu-led teams are always a mystery to me, and this year seems to be no different. But nonetheless, the Spark are epic, and I look forward to watching them grow. The Dallas Fuel. You are just as good as we imagined. It's safe to say that the Fuel are very dangerous still. They beat pretty much all of the other top teams in North America at least once during this entire stage, and along the way we witnessed the power of Hanbin's unreal MVP level Zarya. But that's not all, right? Chio, I believe that he's been a fine replacement at main support, and the new hit skins are giving the Dallas fans what they've always dreamed of, and that is some true flexibility at the damage roll. And Edison in particular, I think he's looked pretty good so far. He might be in for a comeback year of sorts if this keeps up. For the most part, Dallas were practically suffocating their opposition. I mean, wow, there was a lot of dominant performances out of them. They have something figured out with that Zarya comp. But the thing is, they don't seem to be adequate on some of the other things outside of Zarya. Rush, Winston Dive, and even Doomfist, they could all use some work. Time to get back in the lab. The Fuel cannot afford to walk back out there and show little to no improvement. Their current play is more than good enough to make them go in another deep tournament run, but if they want to go all the way this time, they can't afford to be one-dimensional. The San Francisco Shock. Inexperience can even harm the elite. It's safe to say that the Shock weren't quite ready for last week's tournament. They played well throughout the qualifiers, but they rarely got pushed. They didn't face enough hardships or adversity to toughen them up for this tournament. And in my honest opinion, that's why they ended up falling behind Dallas, Atlanta, and the Gladiators. Their pre-tournament hardships toughened them up. Not to mention that they all have veterans who are used to these types of high-pressure scenarios. The Shock had neither, right? Their youth was put on full display for this tournament. Crazy potential or not, this team is almost all rookies, you have to remember. However, this is the kind of experience that could only make them stronger from here. I almost guarantee it, in fact. They got it out of their system early. The pressure of going undefeated and playing extremely well as the best team in NA, it's over. You're done. You got through it. The Shock fan base, in my opinion at least, should be feeling pretty happy. You have quickly moved on from your old championship core for a potential new one. All of the new guys were everything they were promised to be. In Kaluj, I thought he did a really good job as the only tank. In Violet, he wasn't even god-awful at Lucio either. Could have been better, but not the worst either. And you went somewhat far in your first ever tournament. There's very little to complain about. It's a good overall experience. So long as they continue to learn and grow together and maybe get better at some other compositions, there's little reason to be concerned about them moving forward, and you'd expect them to be back in the same position. And they have a great opportunity to prove themselves and come back out on the right foot as they've got a big week coming up. Let's see how they do. But until then, that's where we conclude this video. That's one thing that I learned about every team from the 2022 Kickoff Clash. What are some things that you learned from the last month? Let me know in the comments section. And if you enjoyed the video, consider hitting like and subscribe if you're new. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.